Hi everyone, and welcome to Art Smart. Today we're going to be looking at a silent film that came out in the late 19-teens. This was a film that was created by the animator Willis O'Brien, and it is using the technique of stop-motion animation. The Dinosaur and the Missing Link is not necessarily a film that stands out as a fantastically great film. It's not one that is on most animation historians' lists of great films from this or any other era, and I'm not going to pretend today that it necessarily is the greatest of films, but it is an excellent early example of the animation techniques that Willis O'Brien would later on go to utilize and do incredibly well in later films. His two most famous films, and the ones that most people go back to again and again to watch, are the Lost World, which was a dinosaur action film that came out in the 1920s. I believe it was 1926, if I remember correctly. But anyway, the film was a huge success for the silent film era, and he would go on to have even greater success, though, in the early 1930s with King Kong. King Kong is a film that has really subtle animation when you look at this great ape. The fact that the ape can move very subtly and with a lot of grace, but there's also power and weight behind his movement. It's something that, quite frankly, I don't think anybody else was able to capture, especially when it came to stop-motion animation, for a very, very long time. And in this particular film, though, there is an ape character, and you do see some early attempts at getting realistic movement out of the character. You also see the humans that are moving in this film, and you see him trying to get subtleties of human movement. Now, I don't think he quite gets it 100% here. The movements of the humans are still a little bit stiff, and they're also kind of hard to read. The fact that this is an old and kind of not great print doesn't really help that. But in general, I do think when you look at this animation, it is not quite the crispest animation yet. It's not 100% clear what the characters are trying to say to one another, and they really need the help of having a title card here or there to kind of tell you what's going on. However, I do think that it's commendable that he would even attempt to do something like this. It is extremely hard to make that kind of movement out of humans, and humans have very, very subtle movements to them. You'll notice throughout animation history that a lot of animated films tend to utilize basically a lot of anthropomorphized characters, a lot of animals, a lot of turning automobiles or something into humanized characters. And I think the reason why that happens a lot is we tend to not judge these animal characters on their movements quite as harshly as we do humans. We know how humans move. We know how smoothly humans are supposed to go from one action into the other. And so we tend to not judge the animals quite as much because we don't study them nearly as much. And the fact that the animals are usually anthropomorphized is definitely helping to kind of mask the fact that animals are not supposed to be doing these kinds of things, and their human movements are not quite as judged by our eyes. But anyway, I think Willis O'Brien does a very nice job here of trying to get subtle movements in the human characters, and he definitely deserved a pat on the back for this. I also think this particular film does a pretty good job of showing very early attempts at having the animals interact on the screen with a human character. And again, that's a very hard thing to do, to have these two very different types of body masses interacting with each other on the screen. It would not be attempted again for a long time. One other thing that I do want to point out with this particular film that I think really worked quite well is he was using pretty good staging here. If you look at a lot of films that came out during the 19 teens, the staging is pretty bad. A lot of times I think they hadn't quite figured out yet how to make the staging of characters on the screen comfortable to look at. Sometimes all the characters and the movement are too far back, or there's too much of a close-up and you don't get a clear view of what's happening on the screen. He does a pretty good job here of laying things out in such a way where you can pretty much see what you're supposed to see. There's a good balance on the screen. And so I think even though this may not have been the greatest film of all time, it is definitely a film that shows that he was working on his techniques and he was mastering it. And by the time you get to King Kong, you have just excellent filmmaking. Anyway, I hope you like this particular film. I hope that you share it with others, and I hope that learning about Willis O'Brien makes you just a little bit more art smart. Have a great day, everybody. Bye-bye.